Well, you took French in high school, didn't you?
I don't remember high school. What did you take in high school?
Latin.
Oh, great. Who takes freaking Latin?
People who have a hot Latin teacher.
Susi bidiste, putamos esa y la interfectora.
Yes.
Latin, baby, still the international.
I got it. By the way, your Latin sucks.
You understood it.
Back in the 90s, I was in a very famous TV show. I'm Bojack the Horseman, don't act like you don't know.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What the Hell Happened to Them? The Adam Sandler saga continues with the Netflix, the first picture of the second Netflix deal, Murder Mystery. Today we have two great filmmakers here, Kaila and Raghav. Joe sadly still taking care of his newborn infant. Hello Julian, and we hope we'll have him back soon. Now, Kaila, would you like to tell us the plot summary of Murder Mystery?
Yeah, so Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston, they're married. Their marriage is, they've been together for a little whiles. And, they're kind of bored. They don't listen to each other. And then they go off on this big trip. And then Jennifer Aniston meets this fancy man. And he's like, oh, come on my fancy boat. And then they do. And then Adam Sandler's like a little jealous. And he's like, bitch, what? Because he's a fancy man. And then they go on, and they go to this fancy place, whatever, and then a murder happens. And so the murder happens, and they're trying to figure out who done it. But Adam Sandler didn't tell his wife that he's not a detective anymore. So she's like, oh, figure it out because you're like a detective. And he's like, oh, I don't know. And then they're like trying to figure it out. But then more people keep dying. And then the French police officer think it's them who killed the guy, and they're like, no, it wasn't us, it was someone else, and they're trying to figure it out, and everyone keeps dying, and they eventually find out that it was the actress because she was the lost daughter of the guy who died, and she was like, oh, because of the French law, I get the money. And then they arrested her, and then it turned out the other guy, the racing guy, was also in on it because he also knew English, and he's like, you dumb hoes. And then they get him. Well, he dies, and then they live happily ever after, and he might get his detective career done.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, for me, the plot summary was really Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston accidentally end up in a different movie and throw everything out of whack. So when did you guys know who the killer was? When did you figure it out?
Oh, I'm really dumb with mystery movies. I never figured it out. I always think I figured it out until I realize I haven't figured it out. Yeah. So I'm just because it's the one time where I switch off my brain when I'm in a murder mystery movie. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't want to look at this like someone who's studying or working in film. I will just look at it dumb. I will just be I will feel dumb right now, and I will just watch it. And I don't want to figure it out, and I do figure it out, and then I don't figure it out.
What about you?
The first time I watched it, because I watched it a while back for the first time, I think I was kind of going along with them. I was like, oh, it's him. No, it's him. No, it's definitely him. And so I don't remember when I did. I thought it was everyone.
Yeah, for me, it was as soon as she leaves, the actress leaves the room and the lights go out, I go, well, it's going to be her. Because the first, because these movies like to do twists, and the first one I thought was oh, maybe it'll be the guy who invites them, but then I go, a little too obvious. Mm-hmm. But she leaves, and it felt like they would discount her early on because she left the room, but then we find out secretly she went back in the room somehow. Mm-hmm. And then there was a little bit towards the end, I'm like, oh no, am I wrong? This is no good. But then I was kind of right, so I'll take it. Now, but that's an interesting point, Kaila. So you watched this movie earlier before. Why did you watch it?
It was in the summer. I was back home in India, and it's boring as fuck because it's hot out, so you can't really do anything but watch movies inside all day. Yeah. And it was new, and Netflix suggested it, and I said, this looks entertaining, so I watched it.
Okay, you went with the algorithm. You said Netflix has my back here.
Sometimes.
All right. Did you feel that they had your back?
Yeah, it was a fun thing to watch.
Okay. And you hadn't watched this before, Raghav?
No, I hadn't. I actually saw this 3 days ago. I don't trust those Netflix suggestions. I don't think they ever get them right for me. So I just watched it after you had mentioned it to me, and I found it really it's fun, it's silly, and I don't think it takes itself too seriously, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, there's an interesting structure to this film where it doesn't have the usual Sandler crew or cast or even directors in this film. So it does really feel like they want you to think it's in a different movie and these two characters are extremely out of place. And I found that to be an interesting tactic for this movie to take. The writer of this movie, notable for writing other Spider-Man films and Zodiac, which is the reason why I don't trust the Netflix algorithm, because they're like, oh, because you like Zodiac, you'll like these crime thriller films. And one of them was the Wayans Brothers White Chicks movie. And I thought, that shouldn't be in here. I don't understand. So I've discounted them since then. Any other initial thoughts or impressions of the movie that you guys had?
I think for me, watching it, I was expecting it just to be like a fun little entertaining thing, and that's what I got. And
I was actually apprehensive when I started watching it. But it was much funnier than I expected it.
Yeah, the movie takes a little bit to get going. You're kind of confused at what we're doing, and no jokes are kind of happening right away.
Yeah.
It feels like we're in this weird thing. Yeah, and then they take the knife out, and then they put it back in. You're like, all right, we've crossed the line here at some point.
I feel like for me, it started being funny in the airplane when Cavendish and Jennifer Aniston are having a beer, and Adam Sandler walks in, and then Cavendish offers him a beer, and Adam Sandler's like, no, I'm not going to take a beer from a stranger, and he's sipping the beer as he says that. That made me laugh a lot because I was just like, well done. I would do the same.
Yeah, they spent an awkward amount of time in the first 10 minutes really letting us know that he was a cheap person. And I wasn't sure where that was going, but it sets up jokes like this beer really easily. But we don't have to expose any exposition or anything
That's
after that.
true. Well, the one thing I found really strange in the opening, I feel like they were trying to set up he's a good detective. Yeah. And he was in the shopping center, and he caught some boy with like a Gatorade in his bag which he had stolen, and I was like, you can really do a better job by telling me he's a detective and not a bad guy. Like, this is not the most appealing thing.
Yeah, and then he ended up not being a good detective anyway, and the only reason they got anywhere was because Jennifer Aniston was so genre savvy and just enjoyed reading detective novels. So that was an interesting thing that they leaned into. We're going to take a brief moment in a new segment we're calling Joe-ments. Since Joe can't join us on the podcast, he did give us a note here that I'd like to discuss. The conversation that happens in this hair salon, I don't know how you guys felt, but to me and Joe, it didn't feel greatly accurate and felt very much written by a man. How do you guys feel about that scene, and what would you guys... we saw what P.T. Anderson's version of an Adam Sandler comedy was with Punch Drunk Love. What do we think, any woman writer director's version of an Adam Sandler would look like?
Probably very different. The jokes would be very, very different. I remember, like, when I was rewatching it, kind of seeing that little salon scene in the beginning, and it did definitely feel a little fake. And I wasn't really paying attention to it because I was
no
just
one blames you, yes.
Yeah, because I was just like, oh, whatever. Like, they're trying to figure out. It feels like they're taking the idea of barbershop talk and putting it in a salon, which isn't really accurate.
Yeah.
And I feel like you definitely miss out on those like little details that like will actually like connect women to it.
Well, so what would help it be more connecting to females?
If a female was involved in writing it.
Yeah, but like what little things could they do? What flourishes? How would that conversation go to make it feel more realistic?
I'm trying to think of when my last haircut was and some things that they say. Like, I know like some like jokes, because for some things is when you're getting your haircut, women are always like, oh yeah, you can cut it like right here, it's fine. Okay. And then they'll cut it right there, and it's like, it's so short. Because your hair always feels so much shorter than when you like cut it. And so it's like little things like that. We always, when I get my hair done, we always kind of just talk about like, oh, what do you do in school and all that stuff. So it's just very casual.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it's not sort of this venting kind of 50s look at what a man would call a hen house kind of style to it.
Not really. I mean, at least not for me, because I don't really have like a go-to like hairstylist. Okay. Maybe if I did, it would be a little different, but I don't know what I can contribute to that because I just kind of go and get my hair cut.
Understandable. I enjoy doing that too. What about you, Raghav? What were your thoughts on that scene and what a female perspective would do for an Adam Sandler film?
It's interesting. I have some thoughts on this. I feel like we write terribly for the opposite gender.
Yeah.
So much so that there's a list of plays out there, because when I was finding plays at one point, and there's a list of plays out there where the rule is it has to have a scene which is between two women.
Yeah.
And they're not talking about a man.
Oh yes, what is this? This is the Bechdel test.
Yes, the
Yes.
Bechdel.
Yeah.
And it's so surprising that there are such few. It is so rare to have a scene between two women who are not talking about a man.
Yes.
And it's ridiculous because we have that for men all the time. So I feel like, and I've also found this difficult to write from a different perspective, which is not male. And I just think it's hard, but I really think you need to put in the effort, research and talk to people, and actually maybe go sit in a hair salon and see how people talk. I don't think the writer's done that.
Yeah, it felt, a lot of things just sort of felt thrown together.
Yeah.
All right, they paid me to do this movie. Let's go.
Yeah. I feel like the whole fact of her being a hairdresser was just there. It was just she cuts hair, so she'll be incompetent at everything else. Oh no, she's not incompetent at everything else.
Yeah.
Here you go.
And then she saves the day with her hair knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much kind of they felt like they were trying to do little Legally Blonde moment, I guess.
Okay.
Because in Legally Blonde, she's she wins because she knows about the hair stuff and all that. And it felt like they were trying to do literally just that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just kind of felt a little forced. But another thing with the whole writing part, when they're on the ledge and she's wearing her wedges on the ledge, I was oh hell no! I mean, if she wants to do that, more power to her, that's cool. But I don't know about that.
That's a great point.
Yeah, it's weird. She spent a lot of time in those types of shoes trying to solve these mysteries. And she seemed to be so genre savvy, you think she would know, you might have to run at some point and do some crazy climbing. Let's not engage in this. But, they dress up for the big reveal at the end that they kind of make up as they go along, so...
Yeah.
They got a lot to figure out as this process goes on. You know what was odd in this movie? I don't know if you guys caught it at the end. Charlize Theron was an executive producer of this movie.
I did see that.
What? Charlize Theron, she's a Academy Award-winning actress.
Charlie's Angels.
Monsters Ball. No,
Which
just
one?
Monster.
No, I'd have to see it. I'm not too good with names.
That's fine.
So it's just sort of an odd project for her to attach herself to.
Yeah.
This film, so you enjoyed this film, Kaila, and Raghav, you enjoyed this film. So did all of 2019. It was Netflix's most viewed anything.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Wow.
It beat out, the top three were Murder Mystery, Six Underground, which is a Michael Bay film with Ryan Reynolds, The Incredibles 2, The Irishman, and a Ben Affleck film called Triple Frontier. It streamed more than them. It streamed more than Stranger Things Season 3.
That's... I'm surprised now.
It was so successful that Netflix... This was Netflix's second 4-picture deal with Adam Sandler. This is the first film in it. And it was so successful, they have already given him another 4-picture deal.
Another 4?
So he has 7 films
more
to make for Netflix.
Oh my god. That makes so much sense. So my first thought when I was watching the movie was, now Adam Sandler in the last couple of years has done some good films. The My Witch Stories he was excellent in. Obviously 20 years
Which
ago
was
he did Punch
Netflix
Drunk.
co-produced, despite not being a Netflix original film, just like Uncut Gems.
Yeah, exactly. He's done Uncut Gems. So I'm just what makes an actor decide to do a film like this?
Well, and so this is sort of the crux of this podcast and why we did it. Why does Adam Sandler make the choices he does when he does?
And it makes a lot of sense. If you're getting 7 more movies from Netflix, that means a lot of money. Because I genuinely think he's a very talented actor who just doesn't make the right decisions all the time.
Yes.
I feel what I enjoy about his comedy is he takes himself so seriously, which I think is excellent. And I'm just but you could do this in better movies. This is fun. This is fun. But he also knows this is not going to be up for any awards.
No.
But hey, you're doing Uncut Gems on the side. You're doing My Witch Stories on the side. You've done Punch Drunk Love earlier. So why are you doing Murder Mystery? Not that I'm complaining, but I am.
Well, so it is, made by his production company, Had to Be Madison. Although, usually there's 2 hallmarks to an Adam Sandler film. It has his friends in it, or it has a reason for him to go on vacation. It has the latter, definitely. It seems to structurally decide to eschew the former. But he got to reunite with Jennifer Aniston to try to move towards completing that trilogy like he did with Drew Barrymore. So, why does he do it? Because he can do these movies in like 2 weeks, and he gets to hang out in Spain and France and bring his family along for a vacation to see the world, and he gets paid $20 million to do it. Plus, his production company makes a bunch of money for doing it.
That makes a lot of sense.
And as a 53-year-old actor, he has 7 movies in the wings, plus another animated film off to the side as well. So,
Damn.
how many 53-year-old actors could say, like, oh yeah, I got my next 8 projects figured out?
I think one thing that's interesting about how it is the number one most watched is I think for like the general audience and public, like we do tend to just kind of like watching something that's entertaining.
Yes.
And even if it's not this like beautiful masterpiece, it's something that's easy to watch and rewatch and have a good time. And I think that's something that people mainly look for in movies. So I think that's just a little interesting view, and I think that might. I don't know.
No, I think I agree with you, because I knew sort of that information going into it, because Joe and I had talked about it a lot before we had even been able to do this podcast, but I was like, well, why would this be the number one movie? But it seems to have a little bit of everything. It's sort of what operas used to be in the 1700s. It has, a little action, it has a little adventure, it's mystery, it's comedy, there's a chase scene right at the end.
There's romance.
Romance is in there.
It's
like
funny.
it sort of tries to appeal to everybody. And, apparently it does.
Clearly.
Yeah. So it did, one of the things that irked me, they get in like a fight when she realizes he's not a detective. And like, this is sort of a movie that you see in every comedy movie, that point where the friends aren't, or the lovers aren't friends or lovers anymore, just to kind of create the illusion of story that something's happening near the end of the second act. They want you to think like, an arc is going on here. I don't care that he learned how to shoot a gun. Magically by the end of the movie. Like,
I know what you mean.
I'm fine with the adventure. Don't try to make us feel stupid by putting these in here. It's okay. Don't talk down to us. We're here for the ride. It's okay.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Although to be fair, they did say that he was trying to aim at the person's foot.
That was funny.
So I thought that was funny.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So what did we think of, what did we think of the Jennifer Aniston character? What did we think of these characters? Did we care, how well they were written? Were they well written? What did we think? Were they just there for jokes? Was that fine? What was sort of your goal in watching this movie, in being entertained? What were you looking for?
I think with the characters, so like the race car driver and like the other people, I feel like they were designed to be like the stereotypical, and I think they did that and made it into like found jokes within that, and I thought that was pretty funny, because obviously it's kind of like ridiculous and it's like coming out of the game Clue kind of deal. So I kind of enjoyed the way they approached that, because it was like making fun of it. And so I didn't like care deeply about those characters, but I thought it was just fun. They were fun to watch.
Yeah, same. I feel like even for me, like all of the I didn't care for any of the characters, but like I enjoyed them.
Not trying to do anything beyond what it gave us.
And I think that's fine. I think that's fine. If it's, I mean, it made me laugh. So I remember like it making me laugh. Just a couple of things. Oh my God, guys, do your research. There is no Maharaja from Mumbai. That is not a thing. I am brown, so I have full authority to tell you there is no Maharaja from Mumbai. It's just because you know the one city, Adam Sandler's production company in India, so you'll be like, aha, let's make the Maharaja from there. It's like me saying the Prince of New York. Yeah. That is not a thing. That is not a thing. Yeah. But I feel like the one thing which upset me about like caring for characters was like the reveal where we found out that she was the killer all along. I don't think she was important enough to be the killer. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
they sort of backload a lot of the
I was never
exposition.
invested in, like, if Cavendish was the killer, I was invested. If one of the two leads was the killer, I would have been invested. Even if the Colonel was the killer, because I feel like I've seen these 4 characters. Yeah. I barely saw her. Yeah. So I was like, not really like, okay, I don't really care that she's the killer. That's not fair. I feel like you need to like make me invest in someone more before you flip them. Yeah, I wonder if that was their thought process. Like, we don't want to see her, so then it'll be more surprising. Where what I thought was going to happen, and what I see in a lot of TV procedurals is that, a person they go to very early on who then has an alibi. By the end of the show, you find out that the alibi was fake, and but they didn't have that moment here. Yeah, which.
would have been helpful, but also I'm sort of glad the movie didn't go over 97 minutes. So I'm okay that they didn't include that extra scene. That's fine with me. But to go more sort of onto this this Netflix situation, because looking at sort of these big movies that have been big movies and shows, Murder Mystery, Six Underground, Incredibles 2, Stranger Things 3, The Witcher, Umbrella Academy. And then with the recent cancellation of Bojack Horseman and House of Cards, and there was obviously a reason for that, but also Orange is the New Black. Does it feel like Netflix is sort of changing its programming philosophy? It recently had to take out $1.5 billion in new debt. Does that affect sort of the decisions it's making and what it's producing and who it's producing content for?
Yeah, I think so. Because obviously, like, money talks, especially in this industry, and so whatever people are watching the most, they're going to try to replicate that. And I feel like you definitely see that, for example, with like To All the Boys I Loved Before. Like, that movie was pretty big and it got all this hype, and then they try to make a bunch of different movies like it, but it just wasn't working. But I think that just kind of is like a little proof of like trying to copy something to make that money.
I mean, I think that's a great point, Patrick. I haven't thought about it like that, but I think that makes so much sense because, I mean, in all the films you listed out right now, which have been like Netflix's most popular, I feel like their best work is not even on that list, which is Marriage Story, which I thought was fantastic, but like clearly it's not up there in the viewing chart. So like, obviously they also have to like balance quality versus like viewership at some point, I would imagine. Like, and Bojack Horseman is a classic example where like the writers got together and they said, no, we want more money, we're a union, the animators, not the writers, sorry. And Netflix was like, okay, sure, we're cancelling you. And what a great show, but like no more.
So it's sort of, I have this quote from the president of Netflix from 2013, 2014, where he says they don't want to take a Stars-like approach and do sheepish approaching through programming and just seeing what sticks. We want to be sure that if something doesn't work, it was because of a bad idea. And in fact, he had told, according to The Verge, he told the creator of BoJack that your biggest episode will be the premiere of season 2. That'll be when you get the most views. And they had only had a 1-season order, but back then Netflix sort of gave its time for its programming to grow despite these low reviews, because they knew binging would allow people to come in whenever they want, and they wanted to make a name for themselves by doing these little projects. And then it looks like as Fox and NBC and CBS got mad that they were making all this money off of very small licensing fees, they all decided they were going to play their own streaming game, and Netflix then had to fill a void and create more content, which, so now they were having to balance quality and volume, and it just feels like, I imagine, one would affect the other. So their new quote now from the VP of Programming, Cindy Holland, is, critical acclaim is important, but we're trying to stretch our investment dollars for as far as we can and make good on our investors' money. Now, you did bring up Marriage Story, so it's good they're still making films like that. They haven't completely abandoned things like that, or even, something like The Irishman, which is somewhere in between.
True.
But, one of the BoJack animators made a show, Tuca and Birdie, and it was more optimistic. It was more female-focused. It still was about mental health and adult responsibility, so it had a lot of the same audience as BoJack, but they canceled it only after 1 season. So I don't know. How do you guys feel about this? Like, Netflix used to be this bastion where, like, weird thing. The internet was supposed to come up and give sort of a voice to the voiceless and allow niche people to find their groups, but is that sort of possible as we move further and as people find better ways to monetize the internet? CBS, ABC, and NBC all have streaming services out or about to come out. So what we've really done is take broadcast TV and put it on the internet. And now instead of being free, we have to pay each one a subscription fee. What do you guys think about the future of streaming and what it will do for the content produced?
I think like for Netflix, like I am really worried for their TV content, because I feel like that's been going down and down and down, because that takes the longest to produce. It's the most expensive compared to like movies, and which is why like shows like BoJack or like you mentioned Tuca and Bertie are going to be cancelled and probably not made again. And I feel like that is a bit upsetting.
And I feel like just streaming has kind of turned into this like more money industry. So instead of just kind of like what you were saying earlier, giving a voice to the voiceless, it's just kind of going back to, oh, what do we think is going to sell? And I think that kind of goes back to the decision of like diversity and like who's behind making these decisions and who is deciding what's going to sell, because I think that really affects what's going on. And I think another thing is like publicity of these different stories, because you see some movies being like advertised like, oh, we suggest you watch this, but there's plenty of other stories that aren't even like being brought up or shown to a bunch of people. And so it's pretty hard to even get these stories reached across on a platform, especially like Netflix, when it has so many options. And one thing with the streaming and having all these options is we tend to like to rewatch the same things that we like. And it's kind of like having too many options can be overwhelming. You don't really use them all.
Yeah, it's a good, we talked about the algorithm earlier, and the creator of Tuca and Birdie sort of complained that the algorithm wasn't sort of putting her show towards her audience. It was instead doing, making them watch Stranger Things and, not The Witcher at the time, but The Umbrella Academy and Dead to Me, sort of these sort of wider appeal things, just because it knew it would. So I don't know, how effective do you think these algorithms are? Do you think that currently the technology is high enough to be able to even do that accurately?
No. I mean, I see my suggestions all the time and I'm like, why would I watch that? No, that's not for me. One maybe out of all of them, but no. I feel like if you want to watch something good, no algorithm is going to give it to you. You have to find it.
How have you been feeling with the algorithms?
I don't think it really cares what you watch, TBH. I feel like everyone is suggested the same thing.
Yeah.
So is there even one?
Yeah, that's what I've noticed, is that at the end of it just shows me the newest thing they've put out after I finish watching them. Hey, you might want this. And I go, that's based on nothing I've done today. You just really want me to watch this people walking through the fields movie. I'm not doing that. Yeah, so there's another interesting thing about Netflix's business model. This is from Business Insider. They have decided now that they only want to have 10-season episodes because any longer it's too hard to binge. And they found that if they go any longer than 30 episodes in a show, it's too hard for people to binge, which is crazy because they put out like 80 episodes of The Ranch all at once for no good reason. And so they now actually structure their deals where nobody really makes a lot of money the first 3 seasons of a show, and all the money is back-ended for later seasons. It goes up like crazy, and that's why they're starting to cancel all these shows after season 3, regardless of how well they're doing.
That's a shame. I feel like the one advantage of like streaming TV was it didn't have to follow the norms of broadcast TV. So you didn't have to do 24 episodes in a season. You didn't have to do 24 minutes or 48 minutes. People were doing 12. People were doing 6. People were doing 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 26 minutes. And I feel like if you take that away from people, if you take that freedom away from creators and you limit 10 episodes, 25 minutes, 3 seasons, that's all you have to tell your story, it's a shame.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with that. I don't know, just putting these like limitations on these stories and just like it's becoming more of a science of this is what's going to sell, so we have to do this, versus just kind of naturally letting the story progress as its own.
And it'll bite them. It has to bite them at the end of the day. At the end of the day, people want to watch good stuff. And if you're going to stop making good stuff, people are going to stop caring.
These shows that are here that we've mentioned are very popular. And obviously Stranger Things and The Witcher and Umbrella Academy, very buzzworthy shows. So they're good, but are they sort of, I don't know, is it bad that other voices are getting lost in the shuffle now? Do we need a home for that somewhere? And is that even economically viable? Because there are a lot of small streamers, but, nobody's heard of Crackle and nobody's heard of Crunchyroll. Like, there's just these small things that, they exist, and people, like, try to bundle them in something called, like, Verve, I think, to try to put them all together. And then ultimately nobody buys those anyway, or those shows just strike a deal with Netflix or Hulu if they get really big and they leave those platforms anyway. Like, is there a possible solution, or at least a line of thought we can take and see where it goes in the next 10 years?
For me, I think it's interesting because I'm very picky with when it comes to what I watch. Like, of the whole list that you have mentioned, I've seen Umbrella Academy and Stranger Things.
The more sci-fi things.
Yeah, and I think for me, like, I feel like for me that's also like, I'm very picky into like what I watch and what makes me want to watch something, and so I'm not one to really go out and search for those other movies on Netflix. And sometimes I am, but sometimes I feel like I do get discouraged from watching certain things because I'll be like, ooh, this is a smaller movie, let me see how it is, and like it's not really the best. And so that makes me want to go back to watching what I like to watch, because I'm like, oh yeah, this is just something that I feel like I know I'll like. And I don't think I answered the question, but
It's all right. It puts us in the trend. What about you, Raghav?
I believe, and I feel like this is an optimistic route to take, but I feel like it's hard to like shut down good ideas for very long.
Okay.
You might shut them once, you might shut them twice, but good is good, and I feel like good like is worth watching, and people end up watching it. 7 years or 10 years ago, no one had heard Netflix, and look at what it is now. So like we can always hope.
I will brag and say I've been on Netflix since 2008 when it was only DVDs.
Yeah.
And the way to stream at the time was you had to put a disc into the PlayStation that said Netflix on it so it could then access the Netflix library at the very early days of streaming.
I hope the viewers know you're 87 years old, Patrick. I hope they know you're 87 years old.
I remember a time before Netflix. But I want to talk about, I grew up, before internet was sort of everywhere. And so I sort of fell in love with the idea of watching one episode a week, every week, and having that time to digest and think about it. And I did it very recently with the last half of the last season of Bojack, and I found that experience to actually be very enjoyable.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of binging? Do you prefer binging over traditional watching? Do you like having that access, and how does it feel as you're going through it?
okay, so this is something I was thinking about because Disney Plus doesn't do the binging, it does it weekly. And with the weekly, I think it definitely builds up your anticipation because like The Mandalorian and High School Musical, the series, both came out on Fridays, and I was so excited. I was looking forward to Fridays, and it kind of reminded me of like when I was younger, and because Friday nights were like the Disney Channel movies or like the new episodes, and you would like look forward to it. And so I feel like there is a sort of like fun with that. But I also really do love binging because if a story is so good and I really want to know what's happening next, it's pretty satisfying being able to just watch it and know right away. But at the same time, once it's over, it's really sad.
What about you, Raghav?
I feel like for me, it really depends on what I'm watching. So I've been rewatching Arrested Development, and I can watch 5 episodes a day easy. I made the mistake of watching the last season of Bojack in one go. And I feel like for it to like settle down properly, I need to watch it again. But I feel like there are some shows you can't. Like, for example, one of my favorite shows, The Leftovers, you cannot possibly watch more than 1 episode a day. Because it's so heavy, it takes so much out of you, and it makes you think so much that you're doing it a huge disservice by watching more than 1 episode in a short period of time.
Yeah, I found, for me, because I started binging when shows started to get put out on DVDs, so you could kind of rewatch things. For me, it was actually harder to remember what's happening. Like, as I look back a week later, a month later, like I don't remember as well what I just watched. And sometimes I'd forget shows completely. And so, as an experiment, I've brought a bunch of shows here that Netflix used to have that are currently canceled. And at one time or another, they had some sort of buzz around them right when they premiered, and let's see how long that's lasted. Who remembers The Get Down?
I have no idea what
My
that is.
dad watched that. He really liked it.
Hemlock Grove.
I've never heard of it.
I've never heard of that.
Bloodline.
What? Are you making up
Is
shows?
it about vampires?
No. Lilyhammer, which was Netflix's first original programming. People forget. They always think it's House of Cards.
Really?
That was their first big one.
I feel like Bojack was also up there in their first couple.
It was Lilyhammer, Orange is the New Black, House of Cards, Bojack. Like that was part of the 2013 spring.
Was Lilyhammer good?
No. But it was really big at the time because it was like Netflix's big, foray, but then no one remembered it because House of Cards was actually good. House of Cards, right?
Yeah, of course.
Orange is the New Black.
Yeah.
But both of those had, 6-7 seasons.
Yeah.
Though were recently canceled.
Yeah.
Sense8.
Yes.
Spelled weirdly.
Yes. I've heard of that.
Special.
Nope.
No.
Love.
No,
I want
just
to
watched
say
the
yes.
title. I just watched the opening sequence because I thought it was cool.
Now that one was big. It was produced by Judd Apatow for the streaming service. Girl Boss.
Yes.
I tried to watch that.
Yes. Marco Polo.
No.
You don't remember it all? Netflix spent $200 million to make 20 episodes of Marco Polo, and you don't remember one bit of it.
I don't even think I ever watched it. I might have saw the name. And I was just like, oh, that's cool.
Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was funny.
And One Day at a Time.
I try to get into that.
Is it about that?
The
Yeah,
Cuban
that's
American
such a
family
funny
based
show.
off of the Norman Lear sitcom with the same name.
A friend of mine introduced it to me, and he would make me watch it. And he was really upset when it got cancelled because it was a really funny show, and it was quite like full of feelings.
Yeah, I remember it was like on Twitter, and everyone was kind of commenting. They're like, "Oh, if it doesn't get a certain amount of views, Netflix is going to cancel it." And for the longest time, they really wanted to cancel that show, but people were kind of saying they're like, "No, this is a really good show, and it's for like, especially for like diverse like viewership and like just having like seeing that diversity on screen." So people were really wanted to stay on, but it eventually got canceled.
It did, but sort of the devil's advocate side of it, that show did get 4 seasons despite very few people watching it. And I actually took a look at the numbers, and they are very low, lower than other canceled shows. So, early on, or at least, the middle part of the decade, Netflix did try to promote these things and did sort of care about projects it believed in.
Just like because we're on the topic of Netflix, I feel like Netflix in America is is like a matured market, so that's why I feel like it's facing like these issues or these things. Netflix in India is like a more recent proposition.
Interesting.
And it's been around for 2-3 years, and I feel like our first Netflix show was 3 years old, and they've done some great stuff. They've probably done India's best TV show ever. It's a show called Sacred Games. It finished 2 seasons. I think there's going to be more. It's based on this famous novel in India. That's a great show. They put a lot of money in it. They've been putting out some movies which are good, and like Netflix in India is actually fairly like, they have some of their bad stuff too, but like they've been fairly like proactive in like bringing unseen content and new content into the scene. And I feel like streaming services generally in India have done such a big thing for the industry.
So is this just sort of the life cycle of a media company? When you're small, you have to take chances, you have to be heard, you have to be loud, and so you can be wrong, but you just have to be noticeable and do whatever weird things are out there and really believe in them and stick them. And then as the money gets bigger and as your debt gets increased, you have to make sure that your fiduciary obligations are met. Is this just sort of what we're doomed to in a capitalist structure?
I guess, but I hope there's a way out.
What do you think, Kaila?
Are we doomed because we're in a capitalist? Yeah.
Well, not us,
like,
but I guess it's our media being produced. Is this just sort of what like we just have to we stay with Netflix for a bit, it gets too commercial, and then we find the next thing?
I think that naturally always happens.
Yeah.
No matter what. So I think because that's one of the big things, you have to adapt and adjust to the times. And unless Netflix does adapt to the way things are changing, then it'll kind of just be something of the past. And I think that's kind of something that they've changed before, because before it was the DVDs, and then they're like, you know what, this is kind of not working, so we're going to change it up. And then that's when they were the ones changing the game. And so I think unless like Netflix can change the game again, I think this whole like streaming platform thing will become something tiresome.
I mean, it's getting saturated, and I feel like there will be a tipping point where people are like, we cannot subscribe to 7 streaming platform services. We're losing our mind. I'm subscribing to 3 and I'm broke.
My prediction is going to be that we're just going to get sort of like cable again, where some company's going to come and be like, all right, if you buy our subscription for $40 a month, you're going to get at least 10 streamers.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a bunch of streaming platforms do that already. Like, with Disney Plus, you can also get like the Sports Network, or there's like a couple of
these add-on kind of things. Amazon Prime's been doing that for a while too.
Like Hulu's something that typically is an add-on for other like platforms, and Hulu's just kind of like TV. But one thing I think is kind of interesting is like YouTube, the idea of YouTube, and I feel like YouTube is something that has always kind of been going strong. And I think with that is because anyone could literally upload to YouTube and they could post whatever they want. And so there are a varying range of stories, whether they're like 5 minutes, whether they're like 30 minutes. And I think that's something that has kind of been like very strong since its beginning, and I don't see it going down anytime soon.
Well, yeah, go on, Raghav.
And sorry, speaking of streaming services, Apple TV has barely started, guys. They have their whole list of shows coming, and they're coming this year, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, Apple TV has barely started, but it already has about 11 million subscribers, which is about the same as the CBS streaming service that has been around for since 6 years.
I think that's because they give it for free.
You get the year free subscription.
Yeah. So I feel like if you
inflated
buy
for
an
now.
iPhone or something, you get like a subscription.
Well, I
for
will
Apple
say,
TV.
looking at the Apple TV slate, it does have some interesting looking content in there.
It does.
But again, right, this is sort of a streamer beginning, trying these weird, bold things.
That's true.
And then, in 5 years, they will be doing the same that Netflix does, and Netflix may be around or maybe a different entity altogether.
Yeah, that's true.
Something to think of there. But so go back to YouTube, though, right? YouTube has tried various ways to find what to monetize and commercialize their product. They tried YouTube Red, 5 or so years ago to let their streamers have TV channels. That mostly failed out. And that was when they wanted their streamers to kind of put out more narrative content. And that seems to do less well on a weekly or a binge-worthy basis on YouTube. They sort of more like the cults of personality seem to do well on YouTube and seem to have success. These vloggers and things like that. So it just seems to be a different way to consume media.
Yeah.
And Netflix kind of... They have YouTube TV now, which is just trying to replace terrestrial TV, but they don't seem to be trying to do the same game that Hulu and everybody else is doing. But you're right, that is a place where they can't stop your content as long as it doesn't make their sponsors angry. Things like that.
One thing I find a little upsetting now that you kind of mentioned that is that the YouTube, when you pay for it, and that's kind of where the narrative stories are. I think that kind of takes away from the purpose, because YouTube, it's something that's free. I mean, to those with internet access, it's something that anyone can have access to, because not everyone does have the ability to have to pay for these streaming services. And so YouTube was something that kind of reached out to everyone in a way, no matter I mean, obviously you do have to have the internet service to have access to YouTube, but I think that does reach a broader audience. And so the fact that you have to pay to watch narrative stories does kind of take away the point of YouTube.
It's a good point. Now, do we have any other thoughts on this before we switch gears a little bit? No? Feeling good? So, going back to Bojack, I don't know how you're familiar with the show, Kaila.
I never watched it.
But this is sort of how... a show that releases all at once has to change and adapt its storytelling structure. For me, I bet you've all, even if you haven't seen Bojack, you've heard shows where you're like, oh, watch the show. It's not really good at the beginning, but then it gets really good. Yeah. Yeah, and you're like, leave me alone, guys. For me, I actually started watching Bojack when it first came out, and then it stopped it very quickly because I didn't like it. Because the first episode, I would posit, is unwatchable, and the first season isn't very good. And sort of viewers and critics kind of relate. But Netflix said, all right, we like the idea, though. And it gave them, a season to kind of work out the problems and figure out where they want to go and put more emphasis on these supporting characters and figure out what their tone is and how to balance things out like that. So they did get a second season to do it. So I guess my question is, should we as storytellers, since we're all filmmakers in this room, should we try to start with our best foot forward? Should we expect networks and audiences to give us time to get good? Or should we find a way to make it really good from the beginning? But is that even possible? Does it take time to find the voice of the characters and to find the story?
I think it definitely does take time to kind of build the relationships with these characters. One of my favorite things when watching, whether it's movies or TV shows, is feeling like these characters, and that definitely does take time. You won't get that right away. But I think that's kind of something where high concept kind of does come in mind, because for me, I get bored very easily. I do need to be do need to be invested, but I think a good example would be Sex Education. That's a show I recently watched, and I really loved it. And from the first episode, I was really engaged into the characters, and I was really curious. I was like, oh, this is interesting. What are these people like? And I think that's what really kept me watching. So I do think there's ways to kind of have... I mean, it's hard. It's going to be very hard, and not everything you do is very perfect. But I think it's okay to kind of take chances with your characters. And I do think it's good to let them grow and change and develop over time, because the more time you give, the more time you kind of feel like these people are real.
I mean, it takes time. Of course it takes time. Good things take time. And when you're in for the long haul, the initial things are often finding your feet. Scary though, because I don't think a lot of people give time, and that includes me sometimes as an audience member. But I don't give time until someone tells me no, give time. I have so many people when I start watching something and I don't like it, and people are like, shut up, just get through it, trust us, it's worth it. But I feel like it's hard. It does take time, but I think people don't give time.
Yeah, it's tough for me. For a while I was like, well, if you don't get somewhere close to where you want to be, don't waste my time. It just takes so long to watch TV. But Bojack is sort of the first example where a really uninteresting first season became something wildly different later on, and so. I don't know, I have to sort of rethink the way I watch and consume things and even the way I write things. But I guess I don't think we should take it as a license to be like lazy and be like, we'll figure it out later on.
Of course, yeah.
When you're putting together your show Bible and your pitch, and your characters, you really should try to do your best. But I guess, maybe because Bojack is sort of an odd type of show where you have to have a very unlikable protagonist and find a way for us to root for him somehow, despite the fact he does all the wrong choices. Maybe that is a show that necessarily would have a hard time figuring it out, and maybe as other shows like that come out from here on out, it will be a little easier to kind of find that tone and balance because now you have something you can look at. All right, well, before we go to our sponsors and things like that, do you guys have any last looks before we wrap up here? Anything we've talked about today? We did, begin talking about a Sandler movie if you ever want to go back to that as well.
It's fun. It was a fun movie. It made me laugh. Surprisingly more than I imagined. But just picking up from the TV point where you left off, I would rather have a decent first season and a great third season than have a great first season and a decent third season.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like I saw The Leftovers. It's a good first season.
Yeah.
The second and third are out of the world. The Good Place by Michael Shaw.
Yes.
Great first season. It just goes downhill. And my feelings are like, I would rather you start slow and kill me by the end of it than like, oh my God, keep me in it for the first season and then slowly The
Good Place is sort of interesting because we were talking about high concept, right? It's sort of a high concept pitch that kind of runs out of ideas a little bit later on, and they have to kind of keep figuring it out as they go.
What do we do now? Let's do the same thing we've done 75 times. Yeah, it was.
Last looks, Kaila?
I think it's really funny because we were talking about like having things take time, and I love the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Do you now? We didn't know.
And I think that's kind of a good example of how at first it kind of started slow, like the movies, they had some issues with some of the early films, but then like you get to the point of Endgame, and at the end, like fans like were dying of it, like just seeing how it ended, and I think they really kind of took time with their characters and kind of reaching that build-up point. So I think being able to build up to such a big climax of like Endgame, I think that's really cool, and I enjoyed that.
Well, and there is something to like we could fill up a whole podcast talking about the pros and cons of treating your film series like sort of like an extended TV watching experience. And so whenever Adam Sandler ends up in a Marvel film, we'll have that discussion, and we'll bring you back, Kaila.
Yes.
To give your expertise. All right. Lev is getting mad at me for not doing the sponsors. Garrett, thank you. Is this right, Lev? Oddly enough, our sponsor today is Hulu. I guess they want to get spite at Netflix. Hulu has 30 million viewers. They have A Handmaid's Tale and a bunch of shows you can watch on TV for free. All right, thanks very much. Do you guys have anything you want to plug before we leave? A website or a social media account people should follow?
Ooh, I feel like for me, it's something I was introduced to a couple of years ago. Fairly popular website. It's called longform.org. It's just a great collection of long form articles, which I feel like have changed the way I read and perceive things.
You can follow me on my Instagram at KailaG22, KAILAG22. I have a link to my Vimeo, so if you want to watch some little student short films, feel free to give those a watch.
Kaila, Raghav, very talented filmmakers. I liked having them on because we all sort of have a different style from each other and different ways that we view media. So it was great to have you guys on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I have been your host, Patrick Scale. You can find out more about me, my films, my features, my documentaries at quixoticunited.com and on social media with that same name. I don't know all of them. I'm not hip and jive. And, of course, where would we be without our excellent audio tech, Lev Van Rensselaer? He's the audio maven, making the sounds that we are craving. Thanks for coming to the podcast. Thank you all for listening. Say goodnight, Joe.
Good night.
I do tend to get loud when I get excited, so I apologize in advance.
That will be sort of fun.
We'll be the loud episode. Hey, Raghav, you know how to rap? Hey, yo, Raghav, we're in Patrick's house. We are about to do this podcast. We're gonna discuss murder mystery. Murder mystery. Who done
Murder mystery and murder mystery.
All right, you guys having fun? That's good.